The Mafia boss's sister humiliated the Black Maid. What happened next left her speechless. It was a night like any other in the lavish mansion of the Romano family. The grand chandelier glittered above, casting a soft glow across the pristine marble floors. Music played softly in the background, while guests mingled and sipped on expensive wine. But amidst all the luxury and grandeur, there was a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Maya, the Black Maid, had been working at the Romano estate for over a year now. She was used to the cold glances, the whispered judgments, and the subtle but persistent sense of being treated as less than. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, she would be humiliated in front of everyone. As the guests enjoyed their dinner, Isabella, the sister of the Mafia boss, made her way over to the servants' quarters, her heels clicking loudly against the marble. Maya was in the kitchen, preparing drinks for the table when Isabella entered with a look of disdain. "Maya," Isabella said sharply, her voice dripping with condescension, "I need you to stop standing around and actually do something for once. Your presence is a waste of space in this house." The words hit Maya like a slap. She stood frozen, trying to mask her hurt, but the sting of the insult was undeniable. Her eyes lowered, not daring to meet Isabella's gaze. "I'm sorry, Miss Isabella," Maya replied quietly, her voice steady, but the pain was evident in her eyes. Isabella sneered, clearly enjoying the power she held over Maya. "Don't apologize," she mocked. "You should be thanking me for letting you stay in this house. People like you don't deserve luxury." The insult was louder now, drawing the attention of the other staff members in the room. Maya's heart raced as she felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her. She could feel the walls closing in as the laughter from the guests seemed to get further away, drowned out by the crushing sense of embarrassment that enveloped her. Isabella's cruel smile grew wider as she continued her verbal assault. "I don't know why my brother tolerates you," she said with a haughty laugh. "You think you're better than everyone else because you work for a mafia family, but you're just a maid. You're nothing." The words stung like poison, and Maya fought. The urge to cry, forcing herself to remain composed. This was nothing new, but the public humiliation was. She had been humiliated before, yes, but never so openly, never with so many people watching. And she was trapped by the fear of what might happen if she stood up for herself, trapped by the reality that no one would come to her defense. But just as Isabella's insults reached their peak, a silence fell over the room. The door to the kitchen opened, and in walked Marco Romano, the Mafia boss himself. His sharp eyes scanned the room, and in that moment, everyone went quiet. The tension was palpable, but no one dared to move or speak. Marco's gaze landed on Maya first. His expression was unreadable, but there was a shift in the air. He didn't speak at first, simply observing the scene unfolding before him. And then, without warning, his gaze shifted to Isabella, and what happened next would change everything. As the tension in the room thickened, Marco Romano, the Mafia boss, stood silently in the doorway, his gaze locked on his sister, Isabella, who had just finished her cruel tirade. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the marble hallway, sending a ripple of unease through everyone present. Isabella, clearly taken aback by his sudden presence, froze. Her usual smug smile faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her composure, glancing at Marco with a defiant tilt of her head. The room fell into an eerie silence, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for Marco's reaction. Maya, still standing in the corner, felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Her heart was racing, her palms sweating, but she couldn't take her eyes off Marco. He was known for his cold, calculating demeanor, and no one dared to cross him. Yet, in that moment, his silence spoke volumes. He wasn't just a man of power. He was a man who could change everything with a single word. Marco slowly walked into the room, his eyes scanning the scene before him. His sharp, icy gaze landed on Isabella first, and she couldn't help but squirm under his scrutiny. He said nothing, but the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Isabella's bravado seemed to falter as she tried to hold her ground, but Marco's presence was commanding, and her usual confidence began to crack. Without a word, Marco turned his gaze toward Maya. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Maya felt something shift inside her. There was no mockery in his eyes, no disdain. Instead, there was something that resembled understanding, something human. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she held his gaze, unsure of what to expect next. Marco finally spoke, his voice low and steady, but with a clear edge of authority. "Isabella," he began, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife, "you've crossed a line." Isabella's eyes widened in shock. She had always been untouchable in this family, used to getting away with anything. But now, for the first time, she saw the seriousness in Marco's eyes, and it sent a chill down her spine. "What are you talking about?" she replied, trying to maintain her composure, but her voice wavered slightly. Marco's eyes never left her. "You humiliated her," he said, his voice firm, "in front of everyone." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his disapproval. Isabella scoffed, clearly unbothered. "She's just a maid, Marco," she said dismissively. "She's not even worth the effort." Marco's expression hardened. "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice unwavering. "Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are." Isabella's jaw clenched in frustration, but Marco wasn't finished. "You've humiliated Maya in front of everyone, and I'm not going to let that slide," he continued. "As of now, you are no longer welcome here." The shock on Isabella's face was palpable. She opened her mouth to protest, but Marco raised a hand, silencing her. "Leave," he ordered. Now, for a moment, Isabella just stood there, stunned, unable to process what was happening. The room was still, everyone watching as Marco's words sank in. Finally, with a bitter laugh, Isabella stormed out of the room, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. As she left, Marco turned to Maya, his expression softening just slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya, still in a daze, nodded. She couldn't find the words to express what she was feeling, but somehow, Marco's unexpected intervention had made her feel something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of dignity. Marco gave her a small nod before turning toward the door. "Go ahead and take the night off," he said. "You've earned it." Maya stood frozen for a moment, unsure if she had heard him correctly. But before she could respond, Marco was already walking away, his powerful presence leaving the room with a calm finality. The guests, who had been quietly watching the exchange, slowly began to murmur among themselves, the tension in the air finally starting to dissipate. Maya stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. She had never imagined a moment like this, being defended, being seen for the first time by someone so powerful. It was as if the weight of the world had lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya could breathe. The next few days after Marco's intervention were a blur for Maya. She spent her time in the kitchen, quietly going about her work, unsure of what to make of the events that had transpired. Marco had given her the night off, but she had been too stunned to really enjoy it. She had spent most of the evening alone in her small room, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. Marco Romano, the powerful Mafia boss, had stood up for her in front of everyone. He had humiliated his own sister, and in doing so, had given her a sense of worth that she had never felt before. But Maya wasn't sure what to do with this new sense of empowerment. She had always been invisible, a ghost in the grand house, merely existing to serve. Now, she found herself questioning everything, her place in the world, her value, and most importantly, what it meant to be treated with respect. It was late afternoon when she found herself once again in the vast kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. The smell of fresh herbs filled the air, but it was a scent that did little to ease the storm brewing inside her. She heard the door to the kitchen creak open, and before she could turn around, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Maya." It was Marco's voice, calm yet commanding. She straightened, startled by his sudden presence. She had not expected to see him again so soon. "Yes, Mr. Romano," she asked, her voice slightly trembling, unsure of how to address him now. Marco stepped into the kitchen, his dark eyes scanning the room. "You can drop the Mr. Romano," he said with a small smile, his voice warmer than she had ever heard it. "Call me Marco." Maya blinked in surprise. She wasn't sure how to respond, but she nodded. "All right. Marco, I wanted to check on you," he said, his tone softening. "I know what happened the other night must have been overwhelming. I didn't want to just leave things like that." Maya paused, unsure of what to say. Her heart was racing, but she felt strangely comforted by his presence. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I never expected someone to stand up for me like that." Marco tilted his head slightly, as if studying her. "You deserve to be treated with respect," he said simply. "Everyone does." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The simplicity of his words, the sincerity in his voice, made something stir within her. She had never been told she deserved anything, let alone respect. Marco took a few steps closer, his gaze never leaving her. "You don't have to keep hiding in the shadows, Maya," he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "I can see your worth. You should see it too." Maya's throat tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't find the words. She had spent so much of her life feeling invisible, yet here was a man who had not only noticed her, but had taken action to make sure she was seen. I don't know what to say," Maya confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," Marco replied, his tone reassuring. "Just know that things are different now. You're not invisible." The weight of his words hit Maya harder than she expected. She had always been nothing more than a servant, a mere shadow in the Romano household. But now, it felt as though something inside her had shifted. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she mattered. Marco gave her a small nod before turning to leave the kitchen. "Take some time for yourself tonight," he said, pausing at the door. "You've earned it." Maya stood frozen, watching him leave. The door clicked shut behind him, but the echo of his words lingered in the air. She wasn't invisible. She mattered. It was a strange feeling, one she had never allowed herself to experience before. For the first time in years, Maya felt like she could finally stand tall. She wasn't sure where this newfound strength would take her, but for the first time, she felt like she was in control of her own story. The days that followed were a slow, gradual shift for Maya. She began to carry herself with a quiet confidence, no longer shrinking away from the shadows. She wasn't just the maid in the Romano mansion anymore. She was Maya, and that made all the difference. In the days that followed Marco's intervention, things began to change for Maya in ways she never expected. She had always been cautious, withdrawn, keeping her head down and doing her job, invisible to the world around her. But now, every time she walked through the grand hallways of the Romano mansion, something inside her stirred. She didn't feel like a shadow anymore. She felt like she belonged. Marco's words echoed in her mind. "You're not invisible." At first, Maya wasn't sure what to do with this newfound sense of self. She was used to being in the background, a quiet observer to the drama that unfolded in the lives of the Romano family. But now, there was a shift. Marco had seen her, defended her, and in doing so, had given her the courage to stand a little taller. Still, she couldn't shake the lingering doubts that crept into her mind. Was it really that simple? Could one moment, one act of kindness, change everything? Maya wasn't sure. But what she did know was that for the first time, she was allowing herself to hope. The days passed in a blur of routine. Maya continued her work in the kitchen, preparing meals, cleaning, and serving the Romano family and their guests. But something had changed in the way the other staff treated her. There were no more sideways glances, no more whispers behind her back. Maya was no longer a target for the petty judgments of the others. They had seen the way Marco had treated her, the way he had defended her, and it made them think twice. Maya had always been a quiet worker, but now she walked with a certain quiet confidence. One afternoon, while she was cleaning the dining room, a soft knock on the door caught her attention. She turned, expecting another member of the staff, but instead, it was Marco. He stood in the doorway, his dark eyes scanning the room before they landed on her. "Maya," he said, his voice steady. "Can we talk for a moment?" Maya's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to see him so soon after their last conversation. But there he was, standing before her, his gaze unwavering. "Of course, Marco," she said, her voice steady but filled with a hint of surprise. Marco stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Maya waited, unsure of what to expect next. Marco finally broke the silence, his voice softer now. "I've been thinking," he began, his words measured. "You've been here for a while now, and I know you've had to endure a lot. But I want you to know that you're not just a maid to me, Maya." Maya's heart raced as she listened to him. She had always thought of herself as nothing more than a servant in this house, invisible and unnoticed. But Marco's words hit her like a wave, knocking her off balance. "I see you," he continued. "You've always been a part of this family, in your own way. And I want to make sure you know that." Maya blinked, unable to fully process what he was saying. "But I'm just a maid." she said quietly, almost to herself. Marco stepped closer, his expression softening. You are so much more than that, he said firmly. You've always been more than that. Maya's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she was lost in his gaze. She had never felt like she mattered to anyone before, but Marco's words made her believe, even if just for a second, that maybe she did. As the silence stretched between them, Maya felt a sudden wave of emotion. She had spent so much of her life feeling worthless, feeling like she didn't belong. But here, in this moment, with Marco standing in front of her, everything felt different. She was no longer just the maid. She was Maya, a person deserving of respect, dignity, and kindness. Thank you, Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Marco gave her a small nod, his eyes softening. You don't need to thank me, he said quietly. You deserve this. Maya stood there, her heart racing, as Marco turned and walked out of the room. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like just a servant. She felt like she had a place in this world, a place where she could be seen, valued, and respected. And as the door clicked shut behind him, Maya couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her now. The days that followed Marco's words were like a breath of fresh air for Maya. She began walking with a quiet confidence that was new to her. For years, she had worked in the shadows of the Romano mansion, but now it felt as though she was stepping into the light. Her interactions with the other staff members became more relaxed, and the sense of judgment that had once been so suffocating seemed to dissipate. But Maya knew this newfound sense of worth wasn't just because of how others were treating her. It was because of the respect Marco had shown her. Marco's actions had changed something inside her. He had given her permission to see herself as more than just the help. She had never allowed herself that luxury before. She had always thought of herself as invisible, as someone who existed only to serve. But now, for the first time, Maya was questioning that perception. Was it possible that she could have more? Could she be something more than a maid? Maya spent the next few weeks reflecting on this change, but it wasn't until one evening, as she was serving dinner to the Romano family, that she was given the opportunity to truly test this newfound strength. The dinner was a lavish affair, with guests from all over the city gathered to discuss business deals that would impact the Romano Empire. Maya was busy in the kitchen, preparing the final course, when she overheard snippets of conversation drifting from the dining room. The shipment is delayed, one man said, his voice tinged with frustration. We need to make sure this deal goes through, no matter the cost. Maya's pulse quickened as she recognized the name of a major competitor mentioned in the conversation. She wasn't usually involved in the business dealings of the family, but she had overheard enough over the months to know how important this deal was to Marco and his associates. Just as she was setting the dessert plates down on the counter, Marco walked into the kitchen. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, they simply stood there, the tension between them palpable. He looked different tonight, more serious, more intense than usual. Maya felt her stomach flutter, but she quickly masked her nerves. Maya, Marco said, his voice calm, yet carrying an undercurrent of urgency. I need you to do something for me. There's an issue with the shipment, and I need to ensure everything goes smoothly. I'm counting on you to get the paperwork from my office and bring it to me in the dining room. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was a task she had never been asked to do before, delivering important documents directly to Marco. It was a small thing, but it was significant. It meant he trusted her with something that mattered to him. As Maya made her way to Marco's office, her heart raced. This was her moment, the moment she could prove to herself that she was more than just a maid. When she arrived at his office, she was struck by the sight of the large oak desk covered with papers. It was clear that Marco's work was always demanding, always filled with high-stakes decisions. As she searched for the paperwork he had mentioned, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She was in his space, in his world, for a moment that felt more intimate than anything she had experienced before. She found the documents, a thick folder of confidential information, and tucked them under her arm. But just as she turned to leave, she heard the door creak open. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You got it? He asked, his gaze sharp. Yes, I have it, Maya replied, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. Marco stepped aside to let her pass, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. Good, he said, his tone softening. I knew I could count on you. Maya felt a rush of pride at his words, but there was more than just pride. There was a sense of validation, a feeling that she mattered in a way she had never experienced before. As she handed him the documents in the dining room, Marco nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "Thank you, Maya," he said, his voice filled with something unspoken. It was the first time he had addressed her with such sincerity. The dinner continued, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. She had proved herself in a way that felt significant, not just to Marco, but to herself. For the first time, Maya realized that her life could be more than just serving the Romano family. She had a place in this world, a place where she could make an impact, and it was all because Marco had shown her the respect she had longed for. It was only the beginning, but Maya knew one thing for certain. She was no longer invisible. As the days went by, Maya found herself feeling more and more at ease in the Romano mansion. Marco's unexpected kindness had opened a door in her life, one that she never thought possible. For so long, she had been nothing but a shadow in this grand house, but now she felt a shift, a sense of belonging, of being seen. The weight of the constant judgment and humiliation from Isabella had slowly faded into the background, replaced by a quiet strength that Maya had never known she possessed. The respect Marco had shown her had not only changed how the other staff treated her, but it had also changed how she viewed herself. She was no longer the quiet maid who kept her head down and did what was asked of her. She was Maya, and Maya was no longer invisible. It wasn't long before Maya's new sense of self began to make waves in the household. She walked with her head held higher, her shoulders straight, no longer apologizing for her presence. She began to speak up more, offering suggestions when she felt they were needed, something she had never dared to do before. But one night, as she was cleaning the guest quarters, a knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Startled, she opened the door to find Marco standing there, his expression unreadable. "Maya," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made her stomach flutter. "I need to speak with you." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had been working for the Romano family for months, and although she had shared a few brief moments with Marco, this felt different. She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Marco closed the door behind him, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her feel both nervous and strangely reassured. "I've noticed a change in you," he began, his voice low and steady. "You're not the same person you were when I first met you. You've become more confident, more outspoken." Maya's pulse quickened. She began, but Marco held up a hand, silencing her. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "I just wanted you to know that I see it. I've seen how you carry yourself differently now. You've earned that confidence. But there's something more I need to tell you." Maya looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Marco hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I've been thinking about this for a while now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I want to offer you something. I know you've been working hard here, but you don't have to stay in the shadows any longer. I want you to come work directly with me, not as my maid, but as my personal assistant." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected anything like this. Working directly with Marco? It was an offer that was beyond anything she had ever dreamed of. "You want me to be your assistant?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marco nodded, his expression serious but kind. "I've been watching you, Maya. You've shown that you're not just capable, but valuable. You're someone I trust, and I believe you could help me manage some of the important tasks I have in the company. This isn't just about serving meals or cleaning rooms anymore. This is about you having a voice, a role that matters." Maya stood there, speechless, her mind racing. She had always felt trapped by her position in the house, invisible to everyone except the family's staff. But now, Marco was offering her a chance to step into the light, to have a voice, to have a purpose. It felt surreal, like a dream she had never dared to let herself have. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I mean, I don't know anything about being an assistant. I've never done anything like that before." Marco smiled gently, his eyes softening. "That's the point, Maya," he said. "You don't have to know everything right away. I'll teach you, I'll guide you. But you have the potential to do something more, and I want you to believe in that. I see something in you that others don't. You're ready for this." Maya stood there for a moment, processing his words. The offer seemed impossible, too good to be true. But Marco's sincerity, the trust he had shown her, made her realize that this was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. She had spent so long being invisible, serving others without being seen. But now, Marco was offering her the chance to truly be seen, to stand beside him as an equal. With a deep breath, Maya finally found her voice. "I'll do it," she said, her words steady but full of emotion. "I'll work with you." Marco's smile grew wider, and for the first time, Maya saw a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Good," he said. "You won't regret it." As he left the room, Maya stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding with excitement and disbelief. She had taken the first step toward a new life, one where she would no longer be invisible, where she would have a voice, and where she could finally stand on her own 2 feet. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind for Maya. With her new role as Marco's personal assistant, she found herself moving through the Romano mansion in a completely different way. What had once felt like a gilded cage was now a place of opportunity, and Maya's confidence continued to grow. No longer just the maid, she was now an essential part of Marco's day-to-day life. It wasn't easy, but it was exactly what she had always dreamed of, being seen, valued, and respected. Marco's decision to offer her the position had changed everything, and though she still had moments of doubt, she was beginning to see herself as more than just a servant. Every day, Maya took on new tasks, from handling phone calls to organizing Marco's appointments. The work was challenging, but she was learning quickly, and Marco was patient, offering guidance when she needed it. There was no mistaking the pride he took in her progress. One evening, as Maya was finishing up organizing Marco's schedule for the next week, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find Marco standing in the doorway, his usual cool demeanor giving way to something warmer. "Maya," he said, his voice carrying a note of approval. "You've done well." Maya felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, Marco," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never imagined I would be here, doing this." Marco stepped into the room, his eyes meeting hers. "You've earned it," he said simply. "I saw something in you from the beginning. You're not just a maid. You're a capable, intelligent woman, and I'm proud to have you on my team." Maya's heart swelled with pride at his words. She had never been told anything like that before, certainly not by someone with so much power and influence. It felt surreal. As the weeks went by, Maya's responsibilities continued to grow. She was now managing some of the more sensitive aspects of Marco's business dealings, something that would have seemed impossible just a few months ago. She had become not just his assistant, but a trusted confidant, someone he could rely on. However, despite her newfound confidence, Maya knew that there would always be obstacles to overcome. One afternoon, Marco asked her to join him for a meeting with several influential clients. Maya was nervous. She had been to meetings before, but this one felt different. These clients were some of the most powerful figures in the city, and Maya couldn't help but feel out of place. But Marco had made it clear that she was to sit in on the meeting, and that he trusted her judgment. As the meeting began, Maya took her seat at the table, trying to stay calm. She had done her homework, reviewing all the documents Marco had given her, but the tension in the room was palpable. The clients were all older, well-dressed men, with an air of authority that made Maya feel small in comparison. As Marco spoke to them, outlining the terms of their upcoming deal, Maya couldn't help but notice the skeptical looks they occasionally shot her way. They didn't see her as someone worthy of being part of this world. But Marco's presence in the room, the way he carried himself with absolute authority, made it clear that they would have to respect her, whether they wanted to or not. At one point, one of the clients, a tall man with graying hair, turned to Maya with a raised eyebrow. "You're the assistant?" he asked, his voice laced with condescension. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but before she could respond, Marco intervened. "Maya is more than just an assistant," he said, his voice firm. "She's a key part of my team. You will respect her." The room fell silent. The client looked taken aback, but Marco didn't let the moment linger. He continued the conversation as if nothing had happened, while Maya sat there, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she could keep her composure. But Marco's words echoed in her mind. "You're a key part of my team." She straightened her shoulders, taking a deep breath. By the end of the meeting, Maya had proven her worth. The deal was finalized, and the clients, though still wary, seemed to respect her more than they had at the start. Marco's trust in her had paid off, and Maya realized that she had earned her place at the table. Later that evening, as she sat with Marco in his office, he looked at her with an approving smile. "You handled yourself well today," he said. "I'm proud of you." Maya couldn't help but smile in return. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm just doing my best." Marco leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Your best is more than enough," he said, his voice sincere. As Maya left his office that night, a sense of contentment settled over her. She had come so far from the shy, invisible maid she once was. She had proven herself, not just to Marco, but to herself. She wasn't just a part of the Romano household anymore. She was an integral part of Marco's world. And in that moment, Maya realized that no matter what the future held, she was no longer just a shadow in the mansion. She was someone who mattered. Weeks passed since the successful business deal, and Maya's confidence grew every day. No longer just the quiet maid. She had proven her worth not only to Marco but to herself. She had become a trusted member of his team, playing a significant role in his day-to-day life. Maya found herself not just managing his calendar, but also overseeing some of the more important tasks in his business. Marco had trusted her with more responsibility than she ever thought possible, and it felt incredible to know she was now seen as someone who mattered. However, not everyone in the mansion shared Marco's perspective, though most of the staff treated Maya with more respect. Since her new role was established, there was still one person who hadn't quite come to terms with her newfound position: Isabella. Marco's sister had watched everything unfold from the sidelines, and although she had been forced to leave the mansion after her public humiliation, she had not forgotten Maya's rise. Isabella's resentment was palpable, and Maya couldn't help but notice the cold stare she received whenever their paths crossed. Maya was well aware that Isabella didn't like the shift in the power dynamic. The former queen of the mansion, the one who had once looked down on everyone, was now forced to watch as Maya stepped into a role of importance that she could never have imagined. One afternoon, as Maya was organizing documents in Marco's office, she heard the unmistakable sound of high heels clicking down the hallway. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Isabella. Maya took a deep breath, bracing herself for what was to come. Isabella's voice broke the silence as she entered the office, her tone laced with disdain. Well, look at you now. No longer just the help, huh? Maya didn't rise from her seat. She had learned long ago that standing up to Isabella wasn't worth the effort. Instead, she kept her voice calm and steady. Is there something you need, Isabella? Isabella let out a small, humorless laugh. I'm surprised Marco hasn't told you. You may have a new title, but don't forget where you came from. Maya glanced up at her, her expression unreadable. I haven't forgotten, she said simply. But that doesn't mean I'll let anyone treat me like I'm invisible anymore. Isabella's face twisted in a mixture of anger and disbelief. You think you're equal to us now? To me, she spat. You're nothing but a maid, Maya. Don't you forget it. Maya stood up slowly, her heart pounding in her chest, but her resolve firm. I'm not a maid, Isabella. I'm not your servant. And I'm not nothing. The words hung in the air, heavy with their significance. Isabella stared at her, her face flushing with fury. For a moment, the tension between them felt like it might snap. But then, to Maya's surprise, Isabella simply turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously down the hallway. Maya stood still for a moment, the adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through her. She had never spoken to Isabella like that before. It felt liberating, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But she knew this wasn't over. Isabella's pride and hatred would not allow her to forget the public humiliation she had suffered, and Maya knew she would have to face more of it in the days to come. But for the first time, Maya didn't feel afraid. She felt strong. Marco had given her the courage to stand up for herself, to believe that she deserved more than just the scraps others had thrown her way. And now, she wasn't going to back down. That evening, as she sat with Marco in his office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in herself. Marco had been supportive of her every step of the way, but there was something about that confrontation with Isabella that had solidified her belief in her own worth. Marco looked up from his paperwork, his sharp gaze locking onto hers. Is everything all right? He asked, sensing the change in her demeanor. Maya nodded, her voice steady. Everything's fine, she replied. I just had a conversation with Isabella. Marco raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but not surprised. And Maya met his eyes, her tone firm. And I told her that I'm not invisible anymore, that I matter. Marco's lips curled into a small smile, and he gave her a nod of approval. Good. You should always remember that, Maya. You matter. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Maya's heart swelled at his words. She had never felt more seen, more respected, than she did right then. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Maya had found her place, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially Isabella, take it away from her. The days that followed Isabella's confrontation felt strangely quiet for Maya. She had made her stand, and though Isabella had left the room fuming, Maya didn't feel fear creeping back in. Instead, she felt something else, something empowering. For the first time, Maya was fully aware of her place in the world, and it wasn't just serving others from the shadows. She was a force in Marco's world now, and no matter what Isabella or anyone else thought, Maya had earned that right. Yet, as much as Maya tried to focus on her growing role in the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen. Isabella hadn't forgiven her, and she would certainly find a way to make life difficult for Maya. It was only a matter of time. One afternoon, Marco asked Maya to meet him in his private study to discuss the company's latest business ventures. Maya had become accustomed to these discussions, and although they were filled with high-level talk of deals and investments, Marco had a way of making her feel involved. As she entered the study, Marco stood by the window, looking out at the sprawling estate. His presence, as always, was commanding, but there was something different today, something more intense. When he turned to face her, Maya noticed his expression was more serious than usual. Maya, he said quietly, I need to talk to you about something important. Her pulse quickened. What's going on? Maya asked, her voice calm but filled with curiosity. Marco motioned for her to sit, and she did, taking a seat across from him at the large desk. I've been noticing some tensions between you and Isabella, Marco began, his eyes locking onto hers. I'm sure you felt it too. Maya nodded slowly. I've noticed. She hasn't exactly been friendly, but I can handle her. I've dealt with worse. Marco's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. I know you can, but I want you to understand something. You are part of my team now, Maya, and I won't let anyone treat you as less than that. Maya felt her heart swell at his words. For months, she had felt like an outsider, a mere servant. But Marco was telling her, in no uncertain terms, that she was valued by him and by the family. She wasn't just an assistant or an employee, she was part of something bigger. Isabella might not understand that right now, Marco continued, but I won't allow her to undermine your position here. If she steps out of line, I'll deal with it. Maya's eyes widened. She had never heard Marco speak with such determination before. She had always seen him as a man of control, but now, she realized that he wasn't just protecting his business. He was protecting her. You've given me more than I could ever imagine, Marco, Maya said, her voice filled with gratitude. I just want to do my job, and I'll continue to do it to the best of my ability. Marco's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, there was a warmth in his eyes that made Maya's heart flutter. I know you will, he replied quietly. That's why I trust you. The sincerity in his voice made Maya feel like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had worked hard to get to this point, and Marco's trust was the final piece of the puzzle. As Maya stood to leave the study, Marco's voice stopped her. One more thing, Maya, he said, his tone serious again. I've made arrangements for a meeting with a potential investor tomorrow. It's crucial to the future of the company, and I want you to be there. This is a big opportunity, and I want you to handle the presentation with me. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The thought of being involved in such an important meeting sent a wave of nerves through her, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the sense of pride that washed over her. I won't let you down, Marco, she said, her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside her. Marco gave her a small, approving smile. I know you won't. As Maya left the study, her mind raced. She had never been given such responsibility before, and now she was being trusted with a role in a high-stakes meeting. She wasn't just there to take notes or hand out papers. Marco was giving her a chance to prove herself in front of people who had the power to change the course of the company's future. It was a lot of pressure, but it was also a chance to show just how far she had come. The following day, as the meeting with the investor approached, Maya found herself pacing in her small office. She had spent the entire night preparing for this moment, reading through the presentation materials, making sure she understood every detail. She wasn't going to let this chance slip away. When the time finally came, Maya walked into the boardroom with Marco, her heart pounding but her steps steady. The investor, an older man with sharp eyes and a businesslike demeanor, was already seated at the table. As Marco began the meeting, Maya took her seat beside him, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. As the conversation unfolded, Maya could sense the tension in the air. Every word, every decision was being scrutinized, and she knew that Marco's success, and by extension, hers, depended on this moment. But when the time came for her to speak, Maya found her voice. She stood up, her hands steady as she presented her portion of the deal, explaining the numbers, the projections, and the long-term benefits. She had never felt more confident, more in control. And when the meeting finally came to a close, the investor nodded in approval. "You've done well," he said to Marco. "I think we have a deal." Maya felt a surge of pride as she sat back down. This was it. She had done it. Marco's trust in her had been justified, and now, the future was hers to shape. After the successful meeting with the investor, Maya felt like she had crossed a threshold. The validation she had longed for was no longer a distant dream. It was her reality now. She was no longer the invisible maid in the Romano household. She had earned her place, and Marco's faith in her was a reflection of the growth she had experienced. As the weeks went on, Maya found herself working closely with Marco, attending meetings, handling high-level business dealings, and even negotiating with other partners. The change in her was undeniable. She had become a force within the Romano empire, a trusted ally to Marco in the boardroom. But there was still one thing that loomed over her: Isabella. The tension between the two women had not gone unnoticed, and it was beginning to affect Maya's work. Isabella, though outwardly cordial, made it clear through her actions that she still resented Maya's position. Maya had dealt with her snide remarks and icy stares for weeks, but it was beginning to feel more personal. One evening, as Maya was working late in Marco's office, she felt a cold presence beside her. Without looking up, she knew who it was. "Still here?" Isabella's voice was sharp, dripping with disdain. Maya looked up, meeting her gaze with calm but unwavering confidence. "I'm working, Isabella. I suggest you don't interrupt me." Isabella smirked, leaning casually against the doorframe. "How's it feel being at the top now? Getting all of Marco's attention? You've really come a long way, haven't you?" Maya didn't flinch. "I've earned my place," she said, her voice steady. "You should try it sometime." The words stung, but Maya didn't let them affect her. Isabella's smirk faded slightly, but she was quick to recover. "Don't get too comfortable, Maya. You're still just a maid to everyone else in this house. Don't forget that." Maya felt a flicker of anger rise within her, but she fought to keep it in check. "I'm not your maid anymore," she replied coolly. "I work for Marco, and I have a place here, just like everyone else. You might not like it, but I'm not going anywhere." Isabella's expression darkened, but she didn't say anything more. With a huff, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking loudly down the hallway. Maya stayed at the desk for a moment, the weight of the encounter still lingering in the air. She had stood up to Isabella, something she never thought she would do. And for the first time, it felt good. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and work, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella was up to something. The tension between them was thick, and Maya knew that Isabella wouldn't let her position go unchallenged for long. Sure enough, one evening, as Maya was leaving Marco's office after another long day, she received a message from Marco's personal assistant. The message simply read, "There's something you need to see. Meet me in the library." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what this was about, but something told her that it wasn't going to be good. When she arrived at the library, the door creaked open, and she stepped inside. Marco's assistant was already there, standing by a table with several papers spread out in front of him. He looked up as Maya entered, his expression serious. "Maya, I'm afraid we have a problem," he said. Maya frowned, her curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" The assistant gestured to the papers. "These are from a recent deal Marco has been working on. We've just received word that one of our competitors has attempted to sabotage the transaction. They've leaked some sensitive information, and it looks like they're trying to discredit Marco." Maya's stomach sank. Who would do something like that? The assistant hesitated before answering. "It's been traced back to someone inside the house." Maya's blood ran cold. The possibility was horrifying, but she knew exactly who had the means and the motive to orchestrate something like this. Isabella, she said quietly. The assistant nodded grimly. We think she's behind it. Maya's mind raced. Isabella had always been ruthless, but this was personal. She was trying to destroy Marco's business, and with it, Maya's newfound place in the world. Maya clenched her fists. She wasn't going to let Isabella get away with this. What do we do now? She asked, her voice steely. The assistant looked at her, his gaze filled with a mix of respect and concern. Marco needs to know. We have to confront her, but we need proof first. Maya nodded, determination setting in. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about everything she had worked for, everything she had earned. And she wasn't going to let Isabella take that away from her. As Maya left the library, her resolve hardened. She had always been on the sidelines, but now she was going to fight for her place. She would get the proof they needed, and when she did, Isabella would have to answer for her betrayal. It was time to put an end to this once and for all. Maya's mind was racing after receiving the devastating news about Isabella's betrayal. Marco's personal assistant had handed her the proof they needed, and the weight of the situation settled heavily on her shoulders. As she walked through the corridors of the mansion, her thoughts were a blur. Isabella, the woman who had once ruled the household with disdain and entitlement, was now actively working against Marco, trying to destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. But Maya was not going to let that happen. She had come too far to let someone like Isabella tear it all down. As Maya prepared to confront Marco, she found herself once again in the study, the place where so many pivotal moments in her life had occurred. She had made the decision. She was going to stand up to Isabella once and for all. She couldn't let this slide. She knew that if Isabella's sabotage went unnoticed, Marco's empire could be in serious jeopardy. She needed to act fast. Taking a deep breath, Maya approached Marco's desk. He was there, as always, reviewing papers, his sharp eyes scanning through the documents with precision. He looked up as she entered, noticing the urgency in her expression. Maya, he said, his voice steady. What's going on? Maya placed the folder on his desk, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should. She looked at Marco, her face determined. I have something important to show you. Isabella, she's been sabotaging the business. Marco's brow furrowed, but he didn't say a word. Instead, he motioned for her to continue. Maya opened the folder, revealing the evidence she had gathered. It was damning, proof of Isabella's involvement in leaking confidential information, trying to undermine Marco's latest deal with the investor. Maya could feel Marco's gaze on her, sharp and focused, as he reviewed the papers. She waited, her breath shallow, knowing that the next few moments would determine everything. This is serious, Marco said after a long pause. Are you sure about this, Maya? Maya nodded, her voice unwavering. I'm sure. I've seen it myself. She's been working behind the scenes to ruin the deal. Marco leaned back in his chair, his eyes darkening with anger. Isabella, he muttered, his voice low. I knew she was upset, but I never imagined she would go this far. Maya watched him, her heart pounding. This was the moment of truth. She knew that Marco's empire was built on trust and loyalty, and Isabella's actions were a betrayal of everything he had worked for. But she also knew that Marco was a man of action. He wouldn't let this slide. After a long moment of silence, Marco looked at Maya, his gaze intense. You did the right thing by bringing this to me. I won't let her destroy what I've built, and I'll make sure she understands the consequences of her actions. Maya felt a rush of relief wash over her. She had done the right thing, but there was a part of her that still feared the fallout. Isabella was ruthless, and Maya knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. Marco stood up, his voice firm. I'm going to deal with this. I'll make sure Isabella faces the consequences of her betrayal. Maya nodded, grateful for Marco's support, but there was something else on her mind. What about me? She asked, her voice quiet but determined. Marco looked at her, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? What happens to me? Maya repeated, her gaze steady. If this gets out, if Isabella retaliates, I don't want to be caught in the crossfire. Marco walked over to her, his steps purposeful. He paused for a moment, looking at Maya with a soft expression. You're not going anywhere, he said firmly. I trust you. You've proven yourself time and time again, and I'm not about to let someone like Isabella threaten what we've built. Maya's heart swelled at his words. She had never felt more seen, more valued, than she did in this moment. Marco's loyalty to her meant everything. And for the first time, Maya realized that she had a place in this world. A real, meaningful place. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was a part of something bigger. Marco's words echoed in her mind as she left the study that evening. She was a part of his world, and nothing was going to change that. As she walked down the hall, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had stood up to Isabella, and now Marco was going to take care of the rest. She wasn't going to be afraid anymore. She wasn't going to be anyone's shadow. Marco had given her the strength to stand on her own 2 feet, and with that strength, she was ready to face whatever came next. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, Maya felt confident that she could handle whatever came her way. After Marco's unwavering support and his promise to deal with Isabella, Maya had hoped things would settle. But the tension in the mansion continued to rise. Isabella was not one to back down easily, and she had made it clear that she wasn't finished with Maya. Maya knew the battle was far from over, but she also knew she had something that Isabella didn't: Marco's trust. For the first time in her life, Maya felt like she had real power. As the days passed, Marco made good on his promise. He confronted Isabella, and her behavior was swiftly addressed. Marco's authority in the family was unquestionable, and his decision to stand by Maya proved to everyone just how far she had come. Still, Isabella's resentment simmered under the surface, and Maya knew she had to be cautious. It was clear that she would never fully accept Maya in her new role, but Maya wasn't concerned about that anymore. She had proved to herself, and to Marco, that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. One evening, after another long day of work, Maya sat in her small office, reviewing documents. She had become quite proficient in managing Marco's affairs, and even started overseeing some of the day-to-day operations of the Romano Empire. She had come a long way from the shy, invisible woman she once was. As she worked, there was a soft knock at the door. Maya looked up to see Marco standing in the doorway, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something more intense. "Maya, we need to talk," he said, his voice carrying a weight she couldn't ignore. Maya stood up, her heart skipping a beat. "Of course. What's going on?" Marco stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He seemed deep in thought, his brow furrowed. "I've been thinking about what happened with Isabella," he began, his tone serious. "And I realize that I've been asking you to handle a lot on your own. I don't want you to think you're alone in this. I want you to be able to rely on me, Maya." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had always believed that her position in the family was fragile, that any moment could bring it all crashing down. But Marco's words were like a lifeline, a promise that he was on her side, that she didn't have to fight alone. "You've never been alone," Maya said softly, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions inside her. "You've shown me what trust looks like, Marco. I wouldn't be where I am now without your support." Marco met her eyes, his expression softening. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "But I want you to know that I'm going to take a more active role in your work from now on. You're not just my assistant. You're a key part of this business, and I want everyone to see that. We'll make sure Isabella, and anyone else who thinks otherwise, knows that you're here to stay." Maya smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. Marco's faith in her had always been the driving force behind her transformation. He had given her more than just a job. He had given her a future, a sense of belonging, and a reason to fight. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "That means everything to me." Marco gave her a reassuring nod before turning toward the door. "I'm counting on you, Maya. You've earned your place here, and you're going to keep it." As Marco left, Maya stood there, reflecting on everything that had led her to this moment. She had come from nothing, from being invisible in the shadows, to becoming an integral part of Marco's empire. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just an assistant. She was Maya, a woman with strength, purpose, and a future. The next few days were filled with preparations for a major meeting, a deal that would determine the future of the Romano business. Marco had given her a significant role in this, and she was determined to prove that she was ready. As the meeting approached, Maya couldn't help but feel a mixture of nerves and excitement. This was her moment to solidify her place in the company, to show that she was more than just Marco's assistant. She was his partner. The day of the meeting arrived, and Maya stood by Marco's side, feeling a surge of confidence. She had worked tirelessly to prepare, reviewing every detail, every number, every strategy. As they walked into the conference room, Maya stood tall, her heart pounding but her demeanor calm. The investors were already seated, their expressions serious. Marco took his seat at the head of the table, and Maya sat beside him, ready to present the proposal they had worked so hard on. As the meeting unfolded, Maya took the lead on several key points, explaining the financial projections and the long-term benefits of the deal. She spoke with authority, and as the meeting went on, she could feel the respect from the investors growing. By the end of the meeting, the deal was sealed. The investors agreed to the terms, and Marco's empire had expanded even further. As the room cleared, Marco turned to Maya with a proud smile. "You did it," he said quietly. "You've proven yourself once again." Maya's heart swelled with pride. She had done it. She had earned her place in this world, and no one could take that from her. She wasn't just Marco's assistant anymore. She was his equal. And as she walked out of the meeting room, Maya realized that the life she had once dreamed of was no longer a dream. It was her reality. As the weeks passed following the deal with the investors, Maya found herself in a position of unshakable confidence. She was no longer the timid woman she had once been, working silently behind the scenes, too afraid to make her mark. Now, she was a key player in Marco's world, and she had earned every bit of it. Her reputation had shifted. The mansion staff, once skeptical of her, now respected her, and even Isabella, though still distant and resentful, no longer dared to openly undermine her. But despite all the progress, Maya knew the real challenge was not about proving herself anymore. It was about maintaining her position and protecting the life she had worked so hard to build. One evening, Marco invited Maya to dinner in his private dining room. It was an unusual request, and Maya immediately felt a ripple of curiosity. As she entered the room, Marco was already seated, looking thoughtful. "Maya," he began, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that immediately caught her attention. "We've come a long way since we first started working together, haven't we?" Maya smiled, taking a seat across from him. "It's been a journey. I never imagined things would turn out like this, but I'm grateful for every step of it." Marco nodded, his gaze steady. "I know you are, and you've proven yourself more than capable. I've been watching you closely, Maya, and I'm proud of how far you've come." Maya's heart swelled at his words. She had come so far from the woman who had once cowered under the weight of judgment. But Marco's next words took her by surprise. "I'm moving forward with an even bigger decision," Marco said. "I've decided to take the family business to the next level, and I need someone I can trust by my side, someone who understands both the business and the stakes, someone who knows what it means to be loyal and to fight for what's right." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of the decision he was about to reveal. "Marco, what are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marco leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with unwavering certainty. "Maya, I'm offering you a position, a leadership role. I want you to be my partner in this. Together, we'll take the Romano Empire to new heights." Maya's heart raced as she processed his words. A leadership role? A partner? She had spent her life feeling invisible, unimportant. And now, Marco was offering her not just a place by his side, but a chance to shape the future of the business. "You're serious?" Maya asked, disbelief and excitement flooding her. Marco smiled, the pride in his eyes evident. "I wouldn't be offering this to anyone else. You've shown loyalty, intelligence, and most of all, you've shown heart. You're not just part of this family anymore, Maya. You're essential to it." Maya's world seemed to stop for a moment as she let his words sink in. It was a dream, an opportunity she had never dared to imagine. The role was a significant one, and it would change everything about her life. But she knew, deep down, that this was what she had been working toward all along. "I won't let you down, Marco," Maya said with determination, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I'm ready." Marco's smile widened, and he stood, extending his hand to her. "I knew you would be." As she shook his hand, a sense of empowerment flooded through her. She was no longer the woman who had once been trapped in the shadows. She was now a force to be reckoned with, a leader in her own right. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. Maya embraced her new role, navigating the complexities of business decisions and building relationships with powerful allies. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt, but with Marco by her side, she knew she could handle anything that came her way. One evening, As Maya sat in her office reviewing documents, she received a message from Marco. It simply read, "Meet me in the garden." Her heart raced as she made her way outside, the cool night air brushing against her skin. Marco was already there, waiting by a fountain, his expression contemplative. "Maya," he began, "I wanted to talk to you about the future. You've become a critical part of everything we've built, but this is just the beginning. We're only getting started." Maya stood beside him, taking in his words. She had already come so far, but Marco's vision for the future was even bigger than she had imagined. "I believe in you, Maya," Marco said softly, turning to face her. "You've proven yourself more than anyone else could, and I know you'll continue to thrive." As Maya looked up at him, a sense of deep gratitude and determination filled her. She had come from nothing, and now she had everything she had ever wanted: respect, a future, and a place by Marco's side. Together, they would continue to build an empire, one that would change their lives forever. With a final look at Marco, Maya smiled. "We're just getting started, aren't we?" Marco returned her smile with a nod. "Just getting started." And with that, they turned their gaze toward the horizon, knowing that the best was yet to come.